Hi humans, how's your day 10 going? Day 10 has been pretty interesting for me. This journey and this 21 days of prayer and fasting has been very introspective. I've done a lot of soul searching. I've done a lot of seeking things within me and just trying to get closer to God, dedicating these first 21 days of the year to be intentional, to seek God, to be intentional about his plans, his purpose, and his doing in my life, and my role in my life and my role in this world, and also seeking those that have never encountered Jesus. So this journey has been pretty interesting. Today, day 10, has been very interesting to me because it talked a lot about feelings and emotions, and that's an area that I didn't really like to talk about before. I didn't like to get too involved in it before on my own. I just didn't process feelings as well. I tend to kind of hold them or just feel very temporarily and then just keep moving. So dealing with emotions is what we have to talk about today. That's what my journey is today on this emotionally healthy spirituality. So in order for me to have a strong spiritual walk with the Lord, I also have to check my body. I also have to check my soul. I have to check my thoughts, check my emotions. So I've been on that journey. And today's question goes back to Psalm 62. And the question, listen to this. The question today is, what are you angry about today? What are you sad about? Afraid about? Those are some really strong emotions, some pretty heavy stuff. And it's not something that we can talk about or go through it within just a few minutes and be done and over with. But it brought me back to what we were talking about yesterday. And yesterday we talked about how are we ready to receive what God has for us? Are we ready to be able to move on, move forward, and be blessed with what God has for us? Are we ready to encounter hope and move forward? If God has hope for you, if God has joy for you, if God has peace for you, are we ready to receive that? What does that look like, receiving that? Because if I'm ready for joy, then that means I got to move in that direction. I have to move. But are we ready to receive what God has for us? And I think it correlates with the questions today, is like, sometimes we're not ready to receive, or sometimes we think we're ready to receive what God has for us, but we're so caught up in our own emotions that it's really difficult. And I really liked Psalm 62 because it's David, and David is talking to, first of all, he's talking about himself, then he's talking to himself, and then he's inviting us into that conversation. And I thought that was so impactful, so impactful. So it's Psalm 62, verse 5 through 8, but I went from 1 through 8. Again, this is something that you can read on your own time. I just want to let you know how it really touched me. And as I read it, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I read it again, and then I read it again. I read it a couple times because I felt like I was reading something on repeat, because it says the same thing over and over and over. And so I was like, am I not focused? I'm reading this again and again and again. But if you're really intentional about it, and you can really read the commas and the periods, and you kind of see what's happening, you see a couple things happening in there. And the version that I was reading was the English Standard Version. And I did see how just a comma, just a word or a letter that was added into the sentence really made a significant difference in the meaning of the sentence. So like in verse 1, it says, "For God alone my soul waits in silence." In verse 5, it says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence." And in verse 8, it says, "Trust in him at all times, O people." So those are 3 separate times. And the first 2 times, it kind of almost means and sounds like the same thing, because it's almost the same words. But there's a comma in there. And those of us that are really into theater and we love Hamilton, for example, there is a song in there that just says that one little comma changed the entire meaning. So of course, here I am looking at the Word of God, trying to have my moment. And where does my mind go? My mind goes into Hamilton. My mind goes into the plays and theaters that I love. But there's truth in that, though. There's so much truth in that. So in verse 1, it says, "For God alone my soul waits in silence." And if you read that just as it is, It's a declaration. It's almost a describing. Oh yeah, in God alone, my soul waits in silence. It's a declaration. I'm describing, or David is describing what he's feeling, where he's at. But then in verse 5, it says, for God alone, oh my soul, wait in silence. So it's almost like he's talking to himself. It's almost like a command to self. Hey, my soul, oh my soul, align yourself because you will only wait on the Lord. And then in verse 8, it invites the reader, you, me, to engage in that alignment of being silently waiting on the Lord. Trust in him at all times, O people. So it's an invitation. It's inviting us into that space. And why that was important and meaningful in my devotion today was simply because, again, aligning our thoughts, aligning our feelings and our emotions. And if we don't acknowledge where our emotions are at, we can talk all the spirituality we want. We can quote scriptures. We can worship all that we worship. But I think that if we don't recognize our emotions, I think that we become fake and we become kind of routine based. Not saying that we shouldn't or we should live in that space, but we should acknowledge them and bring those before the Lord and tell them, oh my soul, be silent before the Lord. So my question to you today is, are you silent before the Lord? Are you able to silence your emotions before the Lord? Tell me about that. How do you align yourself with the Lord?